Alright, so just gonna do a quick video about running down my program. It's Pong, so it just works like this. The ball jumps around, and if it hits the left or the right side, it will be counted in the scores, and the ball bounces off on the paddles. There is something with Turing where the paddle actually goes through like that. If you move it too fast, it's probably with how the time delay works and um, just everything when it runs. So that's something that I don't know how to avoid yet. Alright, so let's just start off with this first two lines. These two lines are going to be handling the window opening and the size. So the first line is set screen graphics to a certain resolution. So this is basically just when I run the program, it's going to set the size of the whole window. So that's basically the first line. The second line of code is view.set. So that's just simply doing the name of the window. So you can make it whatever you want. It's optional. And then the third line is declaring the variable chars and making an array of char booleans. So basically it means that you're just declaring all the keys on the keyboard in an array so that you can use them later for player input. So then the next four variables are for ball movement and just ball in general. So what I did here is just to declare the x and y values of the ball. So it starts on the left side. I can make it so it starts from the middle as well, but just something I put in. And then here, these two are the x and y increments for the ball. You could probably just make it into one increment value, but I'll probably change that later. And then after that, these four lines of codes will be about declaring the fonts used. So in Turing, there should be default fonts, or your computer probably has default fonts that you can call to. So what these two lines are just declaring the variable font1 and font2 so I can use it later, and I declare them as an int. And the next two here are just when I just use the font1 and font2 and declaring what type of font and what size they're going to be. So what I have here is font1 is set to a new font that is sans serif 30, so that's just the size of the text. And the font2 is just size 12. And then the next chunk of variables here are for the paddle. So I'm going to go first with, let's see, the y values of the left paddle. So basically it's just the, hold on, let's get a documentation up. So what we got, draw fill box. So this is what we're going to have when we are drawing the paddles. So these paddles right here. So as you can see, yikes. Okay, so as you can see in the documentation, it says you're gonna have an x1 value, a y1 value, x2 value, and a y2 variable. So it's basically just gonna be the bottom left corner and the top right corner. So in the program itself, in the code itself, I declared it so lpad y1 will be the bottom y coordinate, and this will be the top y coordinate. And you just do the same thing with the left and right paddles. So you're going to have two x coordinates and two y coordinates. One set of them will be the bottom left corner, and one set of it will be the top right corner. So these are just the preset values, so when I run the game, it's just where they are in the beginning, and you can just add and whatever to it. So going back to these last two, so these are just increment values. So instead, you could just do down here. You can just do it so it's +1 instead of having a variable, but it's just ease of use if you want to make it so it's independent of each other. And then the next two we're gonna have is for player score. So you want to have a variable that stores the player score. So for me, I'm gonna do so it starts at 0, obviously, because you're not gonna have It's not going to start from 1. That's just how the game works. So you got player 1 score, player 2 score, and it's stored as an int that is equal to 0. So then this is just for the graphics so that it renders everything off screen until you do the command down here, view.update. So that refreshes the whole screen. So it replaces your current screen with the new and updated. So it's just something to do with the animations. So that makes it more smoother. So it just renders it before, and then whenever this whole loop runs, it will update the screen. So this happens relatively quickly. This is about 2 milliseconds if I'm correct about it. And then CLS, we're going to have a loop so it doesn't end. We're going to have CLS, so it clears the screen for it to draw a new animation every time. And then we're going to have draw fill box. This one should be the top bar. Or no, that's this fill box is just I don't think we need it. This should be just for okay, yeah. So that's just the middle line. So I'm just going to comment that middle line. So that middle line is going to separate the two paddles so they can't go on each side of each other. It's set to 3, which is the color turquoise. And then we're going to have these two, which will be the paddles. So with the variables that we've talked about before, we've implemented it here. So this will be x1 value, y1 value, x2 value, and y2 value. And the last one will be the color. So you can either say white or do the numeric code of it. And the second one is just the same thing with the right paddle x1 value, y1 value, x2 value, and y2 value, and the color. And then the next one is draw fill box. That will be the top bar. So when we run it, it's going to be this right here. And I don't know why it puts me back to the end of the program, but and then so after this draw fill box and all the graphics, we're going to have draw text. So this is where it gets a bit complicated, but just bear with me. The first thing is just that draw text, that's the syntax for it, and then this will be the words. So these words right here, and this is actually an integer that is updated every time it hits this side or this side, and it will give a point according to whichever side got the point. So just to break it down a bit, so this is so that it converts the variable, this variable, into a string. So for some reason in Turing it doesn't let you actually to put just this. So it's a integer. It actually treats this whole thing as a string, so you need to convert that integer as a string. So this is I'm just simply writing a string that is player 1 score, and then you plus the integer player score, which is basically a string as well. And then these two values will be the x value and the y value of where the words will be. So 25, the x coordinate is 25, and then 720 is the height, the y value rather. And then this is when you call the font, the different fonts. So in my program I use 2 fonts. So I call back to this variable, font1. So that would be sans serif 30, size 30. And then the color of the text, so it's the same thing with the player score 2 as well. And then this is just a little notice I put so that the player will know to not move the paddles too fast. So let's see, let me demonstrate it. So if I move it slowly, the paddle will block, but if I move it too fast, it will just go right through. It's just something with Turing, not sure. See, so that there was collision, and then if I go too fast, let's see right here, I go too fast like that, it just went through. So that's just something I noticed. And next we're going to go through to the ball collision. So what I did is just that I'll set, so a ball, when ball is added, then it will equal to, so when ball plus x inc, it will equal to x ball. So for example, I have down here, right, yeah, so this line right here will be for the x coordinates of the ball, So when the x value of the ball is bigger than equal to max x, or the ball is smaller than 0, so speaking of x values, if the ball is larger than equal to this side, then it will do -1, so it would just bounce off. It will just go in the other direction rather. And then if it is smaller than equal to 0, then it will just go in the other direction. And then the next line here will be the y values. So this is all besides the paddle collisions, because the paddle collisions will be another if statement. So the y value would be of the ball, if it's bigger than this right here, then it's going to go on the other direction. If it's smaller than 0, smaller or equal to 0, then it will bounce back in the other direction. And then for the paddle collision detection, I made it so it's just I give it the parameters of this coordinate, so the x1 and y1, and then the x1 and x2 and y2. So I just give it, if it is smaller than this value and bigger than this value, then it would reflect. So a common thing that people will do is they'll set them both to -1, but if you set them both to -1, it would go. So if the ball was to, like, if the ball is my cursor, it would hit the paddle and just go back at the same direction. So what I did is just so one of them is negative and one is positive, so then it would just go at another direction. So we're gonna get into the player input. So this is just so that the program knows what to fetch. So it's fetching all the possible input or key downs. So you can do key pressed. This is just key down, so when you press the key, then it will register something. And then we're going to use the array of chars. So it's going to take the array, the array of characters on your keyboard that you will be using. So the first one will be for up arrow, and then in every of these statements I have it so there's a restriction to where it can go. So the paddle cannot go, so if it's key up arrow, so this is for my right paddle up here, so you see my right paddle, so I made it so it's always smaller than the top value. So the top value will be y2, so it has to be smaller than that value, so it doesn't actually go through everything. And then it has to be bigger than the bottom value, so it doesn't go. So the the y1 value. And then I just did the same with the left one as well, so that it is, so the y2 value is not greater than the dimensions of this box, and then the y1 value is not smaller than the bottom. And then just the same thing with the x values as well. You just have to make it so it cannot be bigger than what this whole window is, so it doesn't go past anything, doesn't go through the walls or anything. And then I just made it so the y and x values of every of the paddles will be either minus or added or subtracted, so it just moves to the left, to the right, etc. And then the last few if statements are the player score. So if the x ball, so the x coordinate of the ball, is smaller or equal to 0, then it will register a hit. So I would just be changing the variable of player 2 score to add 1, and then when I add 1, it's going to affect what it outputs here, these two variables. So when this loop runs, it's going to go over everything, and then it's going to update automatically by itself. So then the next one is if the x coordinate of the ball is bigger than or equal to max x, then it's going to add 1. So and then there's a variable, one is for player 2 and one is for player 1. And that's basically it. The last three are just time delay, so however fast or slow you want the game to be updated. And the view.update would be just to see the new animation, and then end loop is just to end the loop.